Hi there and welcome. We're so glad you're here with us today for our webinar, Maximizing Member Engagement, the Role of Continuing Education in Associations. Thanks for joining us. I'm honored to introduce you to today's speaker, Jen Hurley. Jen brings decades of experience in the healthcare, education, and quality improvement industries. She is the Chief Executive Officer of Goodwin Group, which she founded in 2013. At Goodwin Group, Jen leads projects in educational program development, quality improvement, and virtual project management as well. Jen brings a wealth of expertise and strategic eye for building educational programs that deliver real impact, both for learners and for the organizations that serve them. So with that, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Jen Hurley. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Amanda. It is such an honor to be here today with you, and I'm feeling so supported already by both you and Brian. So really, it takes a village, I'll use the term. Brian is helping with the slides today, and Amanda is going to be helping with the chat. So I did recognize a few names on the list today, so shout out to my friends out there. I'm so glad you're here. Really excited to be here talking about, maximizing member engagement, the role of continuing education in associations. So I have a few slides that we can go through, but I also have a few interactive elements built into the presentation today. So I'll pause us along the way so we can join along. Now, if you're anything like me, you may be watching this webinar over lunch or kind of doing some multitasking, so no pressure to participate, but I did pull together a lot of my favorite things in this presentation. And so to the degree that you can join me in trying out some of them along the way, it'll just make the experience much more fun for you. So with that, we can go to the next slide, actually probably advance to, because I had the agenda on one slide, Brian. Yeah, we can advance to the next one. All right, so I just wanted to start out by talking a little bit about continuing education. And I wanted to say that accreditation matters. While we know that not all of our learners are going to actually claim credit, they may not all be obtaining a certificate, there's an inherent value of an accreditation mark that does impact a decision to attend or participate in an activity. There's an assumption that there may be some promotion if an educational activity is not accredited. But as we all know, having accredited education, it's a process. So again, I'm going to share with everyone today some of my tools and some of my thinking around building accredited education programs, and hopefully you'll find these helpful too. So we can go to the next slide. All right. So I wanted to start out with this concept of knowing your learner, which aligns well with most of the accreditation requirements and also with, kind of general marketing 101 requirements. So we can go to the next slide. And what I think that's really important before you set out to create an educational activity, what becomes really important is to get into the right mindset. And I like to get into the mindset of a marketer. I like to think like my marketing team. I want to find out where my members are, where they're currently going for information, maybe even looking at some of my competitors. I'm going to think a lot about human-centered design or design thinking principles when I'm thinking about the education. I'm going to use data. I want it to be evidence-based, so maybe doing some needs assessments. And so part of the talk today will look at maybe some examples of questions and methodologies that could be helpful there. And then I wanted to share a new approach that I learned about called learning cluster design, and just a couple of aspects of that, which might get you thinking too. So we can go to the next slide. So first up, I wanted to find out from those of you who are with us today, how are you currently gathering information to understand what your learners or members want? Maybe you're doing online surveys, maybe you're not gathering data. The experts are your source of learner needs. Maybe some of you are doing focus groups. There might be some of you out there who have really innovative ways for getting at this information. So I'd love to hear from those in the audience how you're currently gathering this information. And I know there is a bit of a lag in when you're typing in your answers and us seeing them. So Amanda's going to be helping me out with this a little bit. So I'll give it just a few minutes here. Amanda, you can jump on and let me know if we have any activity in there yet. We got any?
Happy to.
Well,
and it should come through. Everyone should be able to see it now.
Perfect. Thank you. I know I've used both online surveys and focus groups, so I have a little bit of experience with those two. And I'm going to share some tips after we gather a little bit of information just to see what you all in the audience have.
So far, definitely online surveys are running the lead here.
Phew, I'm kind of relieved because like some of the stuff over my next slides relates to online surveys. Well, it also could be applicable to focus groups, but thank you for that. I think we can move on to the next slide where we're waiting. And Amanda, just pop in and let me know if there's other answers that are coming in that we want to address. So I just wanted to touch on this concept of human-centered design or design thinking. And this image on the right side of your screen, I think just encapsulates this concept brilliantly, because you set out with these intentions to build something, you design it, you know, very complex, beautiful pathways, and then everybody just makes the shortcut. So always thinking about the human involved and who ultimately you're designing for is this concept of human-centered design and kind of really understanding who that person is. So on the next slide, I have a couple of examples of questions that might help us understand our learners. So question A, and in the chat, you can say which question you like better. And Brian, if you build it, it prompts what the question is for this. So the question is, which question do you think will yield better information, A or B? And I'll describe them as you guys are thinking about it. So question A would be a question where you have check boxes. So, you know, you think about an online survey and you're checking the box for the things that you might like. Whereas question B is an open-ended text box. So just looking at those two questions, which one do you think would give you better information? And again, giving you better information. And Amanda, if you want to jump in and let me know if we've got any answers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, just for those of you who do not see any of the polls popping up, it is probably user error. And you may not be seeing those, so just feel free to type into the chat what your response is. I do see a lot of additional responses that came in, Jen, from our first poll question, and I do even see where a couple of people have said they don't gather information, and that's something that they're wanting to learn more and do more with today. So we'll give a moment here for folks to chime in on this one. Okay, wait, we're getting a handful. Okay, B is leading. So
okay. Good.
Because
that's
still,
the one. Yep. That's the one I like the best too. So we can move on. We can move on to the next slide too. And similarly, I have another question just to give another example. And I flip-flop the scale here, so this may get a little confusing for you in assessing the results, Amanda. But the next one I have is two examples. Question A. Please share the top 3 topics for which you'd like to see our organization develop content, with 3 open-ended boxes. And then question B would be, which of the following topics are of interest to you? Again, checking the box. And, you know, you can chat in or poll in, however it's showing on your screen. Do you like question A or B better in terms of which question do you think will yield better information? And Brian, you can build that so that the question pops up at the bottom. Yeah, again, which question do you think will yield better information for you? And while you guys are kind of thinking about this and maybe answering, I wanted to address just one concern that I often encounter when I'm working with organizations to develop needs assessment surveys, and that's survey fatigue. And it's very real. We know this. And the more questions we have, the greater the chances are that our response rate is going to be lower. So I'm also a huge fan of keeping it simple and only having the highest yield questions, just keeping it as short as possible, but using open-ended. The other concern I encounter frequently when we're dealing with open-ended questions is like, that's a lot of data. Those are a lot of comments. Well, technology can really help us. Years ago, word clouds came out, and that was how, we were able to consume, open-ended responses. Those were pretty good. And then phrase clouds, where it could string together a few words and you could come up with topics that were popular. And now we have AI. So it totally changes the game. So, don't be afraid of open-ended questions anymore, but don't have a ton of them. Again, highest yield questions, less than 5 in a survey, and you'll get a better response rate. And so I'm going to stop talking, Amanda, so you can share any updates on which question folks like better here.
Absolutely. So it's tied. At first, it was like B, 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 and now we've got quite a few people saying A. I think you've maybe convinced them a little bit. I also see a little bit of chat here regarding that. So, of course, open-ended is better if you have a small group. You just mentioned that for thousands of responses, you really just need a few options. I like this individual here. So Caroline here says she would combine. So question A, the wording, but not do it as ranking with choices similar to what you've listed in B. And then I also have another person here, Zoe, who says it's not necessarily better. Those questions just get different information. So there is some, some differences here, but for the most part, we're really kind of neck and neck with people going with both options. I think B might still be slightly in the lead, though.
Thank you. Well, I flip-flopped the scale too. So, like on the prior slide, B was the one I liked best. And on this slide, A is the one that I like best. So I think that's really interesting feedback. And I appreciate you sharing that. And I guess, you guys are right in that you could combine all these questions and get a lot more data. But then I'm drawn back to 5 questions. And it's like, keep it to 5 questions. So I tend to just default to asking the open-ended questions so that I can get a little bit richer data rather than, a ranking question and then an open-ended, just because I don't want my surveys to be so long. So, so that's kind of where I've gone with it. But again, if you guys are having good experience asking the rank and then asking open-ended, stick with that. So speaking of AI, if we go to the next slide, I just asked ChatGPT to put together a questionnaire for me, some questions that I could use to assess, learning needs of members in a healthcare organization using design thinking approaches. And it came up with 20 questions. So I put this in the slide just because I think it came up with some really interesting ways to ask for different information that might yield better data from an open-ended response perspective. So again, these slides are yours to keep, or you can just open up ChatGPT or any other AI engine that you like and ask it a similar prompt to get just some different questions, that might give you better information. So again, leave behind here. Our next slide, I wanted to talk a little bit about learning cluster design. Now, here's some history of learning cluster design. I was working on a contract for CMS, and within the contract, there was an encouragement to learn about the learning cluster design model. This is a relatively new approach. At the time, I think it was 2019 or 2020 when it first came out, and it was we were encouraged to learn about it. So I went to the course, and I'm so glad that I did, because I think it rolls up a lot of other methodologies into one approach. And for me, at least, it really resonated with me, this concept of surrounding learners with meaningful learning assets. That felt like, yes, that's what I want to do. And then the other aspects of this model are just really interesting kind of triggers for me along the way. And the first I wanted to highlight for us as it pertains to knowing your learner and member needs would be the learn aspect of this model, learner to learner differences. And if we go to the next slide, I wanted to try out an interactive exercise. So this may take a little bit of coordination. Not sure how we're really going to pull this off, but let's at least give it a try. So I'm asking you to multitask. So what you're going to need is your imagination and maybe Google to do an image search, or if you're comfortable working in an AI engine, pull up an AI engine. And I want to play around with this concept of developing a learner persona. And so if we go to the next slide, I'll tell you a little bit about what a learner persona is, and you can kind of be pulling up your browser windows along the way. So this learner to learner differences concept within the learning cluster design model is about developing a learner persona. And when I was learning about this model, that really resonated with me, because it's all about really getting to know who your learner is, making it very personal, using imagery, like so that you can actually see the person. And that's who you're designing your education for is Susan. She's a charge nurse. She's on the Med-Surg Florida Rural Hospital in Nebraska. She has 2 grown children with a grandbaby on the way. She's worried about staffing shortages during the night shift and patient falls. So then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, that just brings you right to where this person is. And I just grabbed a Google image for on this page. And then on the next slide, I actually just prompted ChatGPT to give me an image of somebody. It's a little bit goofy there, but just to give you an example, it kind of makes getting to know your members, getting to know your learners a little bit more fun. And I truly do look at ChatGPT and AI as a team member, not just a tool. So you can kind of play around with it and have a conversation with it if you're working in a silo like I often am. All right. So, all right. So now it's your turn. If we go to the next slide, this is what I want you to use your Google image search for, or AI if you're comfortable. We have 3 different learners, just thinking about broad categories for healthcare learners: Sally, who's an MD, Melody, who's a PA, and Mark, who's an RN. And so what I would love for you to do is just think about your organization, think about your members, think about a Sally in your organization, a Melody in your organization, a Mark in your organization, and create a learner persona using a Google search. Give them a personality, give them a life story, and then maybe share with the group if you're comfortable. So if you build the slide, Brian, it has kind of the instructions there. So go ahead and open up your, Google search, or open up your AI, and just create a persona for these representative learners as they would fit in your organization. We're covering a broad array of organizations. So just, pick the ones that are closest to you and play around with it a little bit. And then if you're comfortable, share your personas with the group. Let's see if we get some fun ones. If somebody really comes up with something kind of silly and but really, artistic that we can all play around with. So if you have one that you're willing to share, if you could chat that in, and Amanda, maybe you could let me know if we've got anyone chatting in some fun personas.
I will be happy to, and I'm curious to see what kind of personas we come up with here.
Yeah. And this is where that kind of the art of prompting, AI comes in really handy. And the more information you give the engine, the better it will do in its response to you. So I often play around with my prompts. It's not uncommon for me to do like 3 or 4 different prompts for the same question, just because it kind of optimizes, the results. So again,
I love that. Even from, and while we've still got a few people hopefully sort of entering their persona here, I do that when I'm trying to sort of understand, like, going to an event and who's going to be there and what they need to know and what I really want them to know. I find that AI has been a really great tool just in helping me to understand better as an event manager who my persona is that I'm talking to at the event, because it could vary. It could be people in continuing education, could be folks in the event management and event technology world. So it's been really helpful just for myself, I think, for this very reason.
Yeah, especially when you're kind of a, solo team member designing on your own a lot, that it can be a really useful team, be a really useful team member. All right. Well, I thought like I might be asking a bit much for us to do the multitasking with the AI and with the Google image search. But just so you, hopefully this is something that you all are doing or feel comfortable doing. And if you're not, please reach out and, I'd be happy to brainstorm anything like that with you. So I'm going to move on to the next topic, which is how did this all come together with your LMS? So the next couple of slides talk a little bit about how you can leverage your LMS, as a tool or as a team member. So if you go to the next slide, some of the key points that I want to make sure that I cover is, simplifying content delivery and learner tracking, ensuring consistency across the platform, and then some best practices for packaging content. So again, I wanted to start out with another poll to learn a little bit about how you all are currently providing learning experiences to your members. But before we get there, Amanda just popped into the chat that we had some fun learner personalities come through. So I'm just going to pause here. And I want to read one of these that somebody shared. So I really appreciate you sharing this profile. So I apologize. I'm going to read it off the chat here. So here's a profile for Sally. Sally, she's in Washington, D.C. She is at a hospital center there. She's a senior surgeon, spent 7 years there, 12 years post-residency, and she is focused on leadership in acute burn care and surgical reconstruction. She's also a principal investigator for a research trial. So super cool that we could just come up with a learner persona. We all know a Sally in our organization that meets that criteria. So thank you for contributing. And we've got another one here. Somebody else shared that we've got a doctor who is research oriented, physician scientist, younger generation of physician, working in an urban academic medical center, and 8 years post-residency, 5 years running an independent research lab, quite accomplished, and is really working to balance the pillars, so, clinical practice, research practice, and teaching. Really interested in investigating cardiovascular physiology. So again, another great learner persona that someone shared. So thank you both for contributing some learner personas for our little exercise here today. I hope that was fun. All right, so back to LMS and the next poll, which is so that I can understand a little bit about where you guys are currently and what type of learning experiences you provide. So thinking micro-learning, social media, conferences, recordings from conferences, online courses, hour plus in length, providing aids or tools or anything else that anyone's doing that's just super cool and innovative. So please keep sharing. And Amanda, if you want to jump in, I think you've already opened up the poll for us. So we may start having some responses coming in already, right?
We do. And I apologize that some people have actually messaged and said, hey, I want to choose more than one of these. But from what we have, and certainly feel free to add in the chat any specific, things that you would like to add to this, those of you who responded, definitely conferences is half of the responses. And there are a lot of responses. So conferences is half. The next in line is online courses. And then really leading after that, we've got a few people coming in with micro-learning and social media. But yeah, conferences is still leading with a little over half of the responses so far. So.
Awesome. And I'm actually really glad to see that conferences are a big component, because that's something I'm going to touch on when we circle back to this learning cluster design model. Not the next step in the learning cluster design that I'm going to go to, but 2 steps ahead, something that I want to make sure that we cover about conferences. So if we go to the next slide, I want to talk about this concept that I just love, and Brian, you can build it here, is this surround learners with meaningful learning assets. I don't know, that's just something that feels so warm and fuzzy for me. And it also helps me connect to the 5 moments of learning need, which I've just created a slide for, even though, I'm not going to cover the 5 moments of learning need, but this is really rolling up a lot of these different educational methodology concepts under this wonderful, warm feeling of surrounding my learners. The next slide just goes through those 5 moments of learning need more, just so that it's on the slide for you, the leave behind slide for you. So thinking about that, if we go back to the learner personas that we were created, the Sarahs, the Sallys, the Melodies, the Marks, just thinking about that, the next step in this learning cluster design model, and if you move to the next slide, Brian, would be, where would you meet these learners in their moment of learning need? So understanding, where do Sally, Mel, and Mark go to find information, kind of going back to those learner personas, where could we find them? Where could we surround them, is kind of the next place that my mind goes when I'm thinking about building educational programs. So again, if you guys would like to share, again, anything in chat or anything interesting, of where some of your learners are. Are there places where they're learning that are surprising you? I usually see in the online surveys that I do, a lot of physicians are using UpToDate. That's where I go. I'm using journals. Those are some of the common responses that I get. Conferences, and is there anything else that anyone's hearing from anybody out there that is like a unusual place that you wouldn't think that someone would be going to get information or learning? You're like, that's interesting. And feel free to chat that. We can share them as they come up. And if you build that, Brian, that's just the question that I had for all of you to kind of think about and put in chat if you wanted to, is where do these learners go? Where can we surround them with meaningful learning assets? Amanda, do we have any responses from anyone, or?
We do. I am seeing podcasts. Actually, a few people have come in. One person said, Susan said, podcasts for CME.
Very cool. Love podcasts.
Yeah. Chapter events, YouTube, online communities, and podcasts. Again, podcasts. Thank you, Caroline. So
Awesome.
a few others coming through here.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for sharing. So we can go to the next slide, and I'll give you a little context for this one. So I just returned from the ACCME Learn to Thrive conference in Chicago last week. It was fantastic. The day 3 keynote speaker was a person by the name of Nidhi Sakdeva, and she's a PhD at University of Toronto, and she studies educational design methodologies, and really blew my mind. So Brian, if you build the slide, the first thing, she covered this concept of VARK, like types of learners, like learner preferences. You're a visual learner, you're an auditory learner, you're a read-write learner, you're a kinesiology, can't say that, learner. And immediately, if you build it again, she said that's out. So the new evidence, so if you build the slide, Brian, I have like a little thing, nope, it's out. Yeah. So she said, this is out. The new research has basically said that there aren't learner styles, like you're not a visual learner, you're not an auditory learner. Instead, she outlined some great concepts, which I'm not going to do any justice to on one slide, but I just wanted to kind of share the mind-blowing experience that I had at this conference last week. So there are a couple things that she pointed out on her slides, and I would definitely look her up, follow her on LinkedIn. She's just really, really fascinating person. So if you build, the next slide should make this disappear. The VARC goes away. And the concepts that she shared are just listed here on the slide. So the first one, basically cognitive load theory, that our brains can only handle so much at one time. This concept of dual coding, that people tend to retain information when it's provided as both like auditory and visual, or read and visual. So combining those concepts together. Some other key concepts she went through is, chunking content, logical sequence, making the education really connect to deep memories in the brain, locking it into, what you already know and connecting it to what's already deep in the database. Again, using worked examples, minimizing distractions, spacing learning out. This was another interesting concept. She described how you want to let someone almost forget the thing and then pull them back into the learning experience. That somehow really helps the brain lock things into the long-term memory. And then sort of along those lines, retrieval practice, checking in and doing follow-ups. So again, from, things that blew my mind from that conference last week, these are just some of the concepts that I'm definitely going to be doing a little bit more reading and looking into. And I just wanted to share them with you because they were so top of mind for me. So I have another fun exercise, and I'm not sure how well it's going to go, but it's called a chat waterfall, and I'm sure you guys have seen some of these before. And so this is a concept of where we all put in an answer into our chat window, but we don't hit the submit button. And then when we hit the submit button, we do it all together, and it kind of waterfalls into the chat. And it's kind of like a cool experience. So I thought I'd try it out with us today, sharing that with you. So maybe it's something that you can use too. So I have some instructions that will build on this slide as Brian advances it. So you open the chat window, you get ready to type your ideas, and then on my count, you submit. And so we're going back to the learner personas that we were thinking about. And again, thinking about that person in your organization, who is the Sally, who is the Melody, who is that person. And I want you to think about what are some ways we could engage with those learner personas in the LMS. So type in your thoughts, again, just free thinking, just points for participating in a chat waterfall. And then when I do the count, we'll just all click submit. And then Amanda, try and make sense of a chat waterfall here. All right, so here's my count. We're typing our ideas, like how could we engage with someone on the LMS? What could I do in my LMS? To engage with those learners, and then give you another few seconds here. All right, and so are getting ready to submit. And then Brian,
take one more second.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt you, Jen. Might want to take one more second just to make sure it will come through when everyone enters it.
Okay, perfect. So Brian, I have just a countdown on the slide that builds, so you can do that countdown. You're now in control. I'm not in control. I'm not going to count down. I'll let you count down. All right, what do you think? You think we're good timing? You think we've given folks enough time with the lag to submit?
I think we might. And I tell you what, if for some reason it does not come through, I will send it out to everyone after, because I'm very curious just to see what the overall outcome is. But if for some reason we're not able to sort of see the waterfall, we'll at least get the answers out so everyone can sort of see the overall picture after the webinar.
Okay. Thank you. And I think the advantage of a chat waterfall is that sometimes when you have chat going all the time on the side of the screen, you're changing your responses as you're seeing what other people are saying. So a chat waterfall it's just your raw thinking, everyone at the same time, so that no one's responses are biased by something somebody else said. So it's kind of just a fun tactic to engage. All right, so let's try and hit submit. What do you think?
Let's
see if anything comes through like a waterfall for you, Amanda.
And it may still lag just for a few seconds here, but if everyone wants to go ahead and submit, we'll see what comes up. This is fun. I like a little interactive exercise, Jen. You're making me think on a Tuesday afternoon beyond listening and learning. I'm having to apply. This is great.
Again, I'm kind of like trying to adopt some of those evidence-based principles that I learned about last week, like letting people almost forget and then drawing it back in, letting you almost forget and then drawing it back in. So trying to model a little bit of that.
We've definitely got some things coming through here.
Oh, cool. And I've used this tactic, on smaller webinars, smaller group events. So it's been kind of fun to try. And again,
let's see what results we have. Okay, gracious. All right. There is the waterfall. I see it.
Yeah, it worked. And
unfortunately, I am seeing a couple of notes that people are not necessarily able to see the chat. So I apologize that the kind of the wow moment maybe isn't there. But like I mentioned, I'll definitely share out what the responses are. And I'm happy to share some of those, Jen, if you would like. There are a lot. This is great.
Yeah, I think it would be great, Amanda, if you could share what everybody said, because I think that would be interesting for us just to learn from one another.
You got it.
We'll say we have a dam on the waterfall, but you're going to you're going to open up the dam on the waterfall after the event.
And I will just kind of rapidly read through as if I were releasing the water. Okay, here we go. User profile marketing for previous learning, more targeted recommendations, different ways to filter activities, micro-credentials, virtual symposia, social media chat group, fun games, animation clips, video, dramacational, micro-learning or podcast, and they go on and on. That's the majority of what we've got here, though.
Those are some
lots of good questions.
I mean, those are some fantastic ideas. That's awesome. Look at how everyone is already, leveraging an LMS. I mean, that's just wonderful to be sharing those ideas and best practices. So we have some real experts in the group. So thank you for sharing. All right. So if we go to the next slide, I'm going to take us back to the that learning cluster design model. And another aspect of this that I really like is this upgrade feature. And Brian, you can build it. And what this part of the model was designed to do is to really make you think intentionally about what you already have and can reuse or repackage for an educational initiative. So I really like this, and this is where it ties back into the conferences. I don't know about you, but so often at the end of a multi-day conference, we have a lot of recordings of the conference. And, the easy button is just to take all those recordings of the 1 or 2 hour sessions and put them up on the LMS so that people can watch what they missed. But at least in my experience, the reality is that not many people are watching those after the fact. It's content that was designed for a live interactive audience. Again, a lot of people are going to conferences because they want to network with colleagues and have kind of that live, interactive networking experience. So I find that just placing videos from a conference up online doesn't result in capturing new learners or meeting, learner needs. So what I this aspect of this model forces me to think about, how am I going to upgrade or repackage, reuse those assets in a way that will meet that learner in their moment of need? So thinking about chunking the content, editing down those, long recordings into thematic shorts. It sounds like a lot of you are already doing that with your LMS. You're doing the shortened videos and grouping content like that. So it sounds like we've already got some folks who got some great practices on that. The other part of this upgrade model that I really like using to force my thinking, and you can build it, Brian, is also just retire. Like, sometimes when you're going through and you're thinking about, I've got a new problem that I'm trying to create some education around, but we already have all this stuff in the LMS, that we did the course we did 2 years ago, and the session we had at conference on that. Sometimes it's just time to retire stuff. So it gets stale if it sits on the LMS too long. So when I'm thinking about, this aspect of the learning cluster design model, it's also forcing me to think about, what do I have that's out there on this topic already? Can I repackage it? Or does it need to be retired? So it kind of forces that thinking. Being efficient, using what you have, to surround the learner with meaningful assets, but also getting rid of what's just noise. And then the next part of the model is where an LMS becomes really powerful, is on the next slide, is this aspect of transformation of everyone's results. And again, this model isn't just designed for healthcare, but it was, I can apply it there. And this is where I think an LMS just comes in so handy, because you can compare your data, learner data on efficacy across the whole program, across all programs. You can filter and striate that data in all sorts of ways to really understand what's the return on investment. What are people actually doing based on what they learned? How is your education making an impact in healthcare? How's it improving the quality of healthcare? So that's, I think, what I find so powerful about having all of your education in one platform, is that you can pull reports and compare apples to apples. Now, that takes some thought, right? So if we go to the next slide, some of the key things that I've learned, the hard way is, on evaluations, I use post-activity evaluations to measure changes in learner competence under the ACCME criteria. And in those evaluations, I can't tell you how many times I've kind of inherited questions, and it's an evaluation that started out with 10 questions, and then we got a grant from this organization, and that organization wants this data and that data. And all of a sudden, what went from being, 10 question evaluation, which was like, ugh, to now it's a 20 question evaluation, because we have all of these competing needs for information. So one of the things that I've been really doing is separating out my evaluation purposes. So I group my questions into different evaluations so that it doesn't feel so onerous to be answering 20 evaluation questions on one page. I try and think about 5 questions. And for my evaluation to assess efficacy of a accredited education program, specifically around measuring changes in learner competence, I'm really striving to ask under 5 questions, and really just one, which is, what do you intend to change based on what you learned during this activity? Yes, no. And if yes, branch it out, have a conditional logic. What are you going to change? And then if no, what barriers might you encounter? And you can modify those if you're JA, of course, to incorporate questions for the team. But again, trying to keep the accredited education evaluation under 5 questions, if you can. And then if you are stuck with asking additional questions because you have requirements like, the planning committee needs these questions, the funder needs these questions, trying to figure out creative ways to break those out, chunk those out into different evaluation modules so that it's not so fatiguing to be on one page having to answer a bunch of questions. The other thing that I learned the hard way, and now I'm very disciplined about, is making sure that I'm asking the same core questions for those criteria that I know I have to assess at an aggregate level. Like when I'm doing a program analysis for ACCME, it really helps when I can get data pulled out of the LMS for the one question about change. What percentage of people across my whole program said that they intend to change their practice? So I want to be able to do that quickly because I want to spend a lot more time analyzing that data and thinking about the impact of that data versus trying to do those manual calculations from spreadsheets that I've had to manipulate. And then I think it's important that you have some sort of periodic review of the data. I think at least annually. And as I've mentioned, using my ChatGPT team member, I use ChatGPT to consume open-ended text responses, and I play around with my prompting so that I get something that's actually meaningful. Of course, you have to test it to make sure that it's legit. You can't just take it for what it is, but I've found that it's pretty close. I will say there is sensitivity around sharing any sort of personal identifiable information. So names or anything like that, I strip that out. It's just comments that are feeding into AI. And I would recommend the same. Don't put anybody's personal information in there. We don't yet know the implications of that. So just try to avoid that. Other things that, LMSs can do is, have metadata included with those responses so that you can start really filtering and segmenting the data that you have. So that is, that is really, powerful, that you can kind of build your custom reports in there. And then, of course, once you've done all of that, you can develop your improvement roadmap and milestones, which aligns well with the accreditation criteria. And then the last thing I have for us, which is probably the one thing that is most interesting to me, and you could go to the next slide, Brian, is monetizing content. Okay. And so this is where I think it's really helpful to think like a marketer, where I started this talk at the beginning. So if we go to the next slide, there's one concept, that I keep going back to from long ago days when I was in marketing. Is called the 4 Ps, where you define the product, the price, the place, the promotion. And this is just a really simple, memorable thing that when you're developing a new learning tool, to think about your product, your price, your place, your promotion. And if you go to the next slide, just to kind of show you inside of my head, if I'm meeting my learners' needs, if I know who they are, I know their personas, and I'm placing the education where they can get it, then my assumption is that content has value because I'm meeting that need and I'm putting it in front of, and I know when they need it. And I think what's important under this concept is the what's in it for me, right? What's really important is to describe the content in terms of its value to the learner. And one of the things that I don't think about enough is how we're shifting towards this automated reporting learner credits, reporting MOC credits, and that is of value. That is a service of value. So wanting to make sure that that's part of the features of my product would be important. Under the price component, you have to be thoughtful and consistent. And so it's helpful to have some sort of algorithm that is used to guide how you price content. Maybe it's per time unit. Maybe you offer discounts, member, non-member, student, different combinations of that, based on those types of attributes. So that's another thing, is that, setting out, have something that guides you from a pricing perspective so that it's, your prices are always defensible. The next thing is that the shopping cart experience must be easy. It's way too often, we're way too far along in internet technology for clunky shopping carts anymore. So, add it to my cart. I want to check out. I don't want to see things spinning. I don't want to have to go to another website to try and check out. So just make sure, however you're thinking about your shopping cart experience, make sure that it is easy and optimize that wherever possible. And then lastly, and I think most importantly, is promotion. It's really important to spend the time developing that marketing plan, knowing how you're going to get that information out to your customers, where they are, and how you can draw them in. I can't say enough about spending time thinking about that and really working with the marketing folks, if you have them, to try and figure that out, because that will definitely translate to some success. And again, using the AI, if you move to the next slide, Brian, I just was super curious to learn what AI would help me with as it pertains to pricing. So I asked AI a couple different questions. If you go to the next slide, I asked it, describe to me what factors might impact someone's willingness to pay for, I just use online CME content. And it gave me a nice little list of things that I should consider when I'm building my educational material, just what I might think through in terms of that. And then I also curiously asked it, what's the average price per hour for online CME activities? And I got some interesting results here that were different than what I thought. So, again, welcome any, chat. And again, I know we have a delay, but anything that anyone thinks about this, just, kind of sanity check or, aha, that you might think about here. And I know we're getting close to our time here. So I just wanted to roll through some of the promising practices. You can skip through a couple of the slides there, Brian, to our promising practices slide. And, hopefully that learning cluster design model that I've introduced some of you to, or maybe you've known about it before, that this concept of, having fun and developing those learner personas, know where they learn, and then use those evidence-based content design principles that I learned about last week at ACCME's Learn Thrive. Again, this concept of curating your recordings from live events, because we know we've got a lot of big conferences out there, especially on this webinar today. A lot of people have conferences as kind of the pinnacle of their program, as do I for some of my programs. So thinking about how you can upgrade those assets to maybe reuse them for another type of learning experience for someone who might not have been there, or to augment the experience for someone who was there, to kind of let them forget and pull them back in, maybe something like that. Login, making sure login to the LMS is super easy. Single sign-on is great. And then, having easy profile changes and setup. Customer service, making sure someone is there on the receiving end of those emails to help people with support along the way as they need it. I talked about shopping carts already, but making sure fewer clicks, the fewer the clicks, the better. Grouping content by learner persona, using some of the tools in the learning management system to, learning groups, enrollment groups, being able to package your content in different ways so that it is meeting that learner where they are, surrounding them with those meaningful assets. Using tools and aids, offering augments to learning experiences, flyers and journal articles included, the kind of Amazon-y experience. If you like this course, you might like this one too. Turning on that functionality is kind of cool. Engaging with your learners on social media and pulling them back into the LMS to have a learning experience is also great. Some of you had already shared that you're doing social learning podcasts, those type of things. For evaluations, ask only questions for which you plan to use the data. And wherever possible, we need to reduce the burden on our clinicians and automate credit reporting. I think over time, we're going to see more and more of the boards. We're going to see the states, the start to use the JPARS and the PARS systems to validate and to as the place to go to see where the physicians or clinicians in general, how many credits they have. So an LMS that allows that automated reporting of learner credits is a huge win for everybody. And that is it. So we have a little bit of time for questions. I know I didn't leave much time, but a little bit of time. So Amanda, do we have any questions in the chat?
You know, I'm getting one overwhelming question. Yeah. Are you going to be able to share the slides as a handout, or are you willing to share some of this information with the group?
Totally.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Good deal. So I'll send that out. I'll actually add that as a component to the Cadmium University site for this webinar. So if folks want to look there, I'll be happy to put those in. The other questions we pretty much handled throughout. Thank you all so much for being engaged, and thank you for being patient as we kind of handled a little bit of some, technical prowess or lack thereof, maybe on my part, but we really appreciate you all just engaging with us and making Jen feel welcome and asking her lots of questions and providing your feedback. Thank you so much. But with that, I just want to say thank you to Jen. Jen, you are amazing. This has been really, really insightful and really incredible. It looks like really no matter what we're doing, continuing education programs, if designed well and done right, are a win-win for everyone. So really great information. Thank you.